Welcome to this audio story channel where we share gripping tales of infidelity, betrayal, and raw cheating confessions. If you're into real, emotional, and sometimes shocking relationship stories, you're in the right place. Sit back, listen, and dive into the drama. If this is your first time joining us, don't forget to kindly hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and like our videos. Every click matters. It keeps us motivated to bring you more meaningful stories. If you enjoy our content, we'd love you to share, drop your thoughts or questions in the comments, and stay with us all the way to the end. Your interaction helps build a closer, more connected community. Thank you for being here. My name is Lizzie, and I'm 23 years old. For as long as I can remember, I've carried the weight of being abandoned at birth. Growing up without a family wasn't easy. It felt like I was constantly invisible, like I didn't belong anywhere. The city I call home is sprawling and indifferent, full of people with their own lives, their own families, their own histories. I went to a small college tucked away in the suburbs, a place where I thought maybe I could finally find some semblance of belonging. That's where I met Rose. From the moment we met, there was something about her that drew me in. Maybe it was the warmth she radiated or the way she made me feel like I mattered. Rose was everything I wasn't: confident, surrounded by love, shielded by wealth and security. Her family's house was a grand place, filled with laughter and light, a stark contrast to the cold emptiness that had been my home for so long. I trusted Rose completely. She was my best friend, my lifeline in a world that often felt hostile and unforgiving. When my pockets were empty and my stomach growled, Rose never hesitated to share her meal or offer me a place to stay. Our friendship was my anchor when I was adrift. She was the sister I never had. But beneath the surface of our closeness, I was fragile. I was naive and vulnerable, desperate for acceptance, craving a sense of security. I had spent years battling loneliness, wrestling with my self-worth, and trying to piece together an identity from the fragments of a past I never knew. I was painfully aware of how precarious my place in Rose's life was, how easily it could slip away if I wasn't careful. I remember the countless nights I lay awake, wrestling with my fears. What if I was just a charity case to them? What if I was only tolerated until something better came along? I felt like I was constantly walking a tightrope, balancing between gratitude and shame. And then there was the unspoken boundary, the invisible line that, if crossed, could shatter everything. I didn't know then how close I was to crossing it. That weekend started just like any other. I thought I was simply crashing at Rose's house, safe, warm, cared for. But I was about to find out that the world I trusted so much had corners darker than I ever imagined. It all began with a quiet conversation, a proposition from Rose's father that sounded too good to be true, a way out of my endless struggle. And in my desperation, in my longing to belong, I said yes. If you were me, what would you have done? Since that moment, I've been living with a guilt that feels like a storm inside me, constant and unrelenting. Every time I close my eyes, I replay that choice, that line crossed, and wonder what I lost, and what I might never get back. It happened on a Saturday evening. Rose had invited me to spend the weekend at their family estate, something that had become a sort of tradition for us. Their house sat on a hill overlooking the city, a modern structure of glass and stone, elegant yet welcoming. It always smelled like fresh flowers and expensive candles. I'd walk through the front doors and feel like I had stepped into a life that didn't belong to me. That night, the sky was already a deep navy, the moon casting pale light through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Rose had gone out with some of her old high school friends. She asked if I wanted to join, but I declined. I was exhausted, and honestly, I didn't want to feel like the outsider again. I stayed behind, curled up on the couch with a blanket, trying to focus on the movie playing on the massive flat screen, but my mind wandered. That's when he came in. Mr. Hastings, Rose's father, was always charming, always composed. He had that presence, you know? The kind that fills a room even when he isn't trying. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a fitted dark sweater and slacks, holding a glass of something amber in one hand. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes lingered on me longer than usual. He sat down in the armchair across from me, not too close, but close enough that I could smell his cologne, rich, masculine, faintly sweet. He asked if I was comfortable, if I needed anything. I smiled politely and shook my head. Then he said it. "You've been good to Rose," he began, voice low and steady, almost warm. "She trusts you." That means something to me. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded, waiting for him to continue. "You've had it rough," he said, eyes locking with mine. "And you've done well, considering. No help. No support. That takes strength. I respect that." I felt a flicker of something in my chest, pride, maybe. Recognition. He saw me. Not as a guest or a burden, but as a person. Then came the pause. The quiet stretch of silence that felt too long. He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbow on his knee, swirling the drink in his hand. "I could help you," he said. "If you let me." At first, I didn't understand. I asked what he meant. His response was slow, careful, yet undeniably clear. He wasn't offering to write me a check out of kindness. He wasn't talking about a scholarship or a job or mentorship. He meant something else. Something deeply personal. Physical. Conditional. My body went cold. I sat there, frozen, my heart thudding in my ears. This man, Rose's father, was offering to take care of me. Rent. Tuition. Groceries. Stability. All of it, in exchange for something I could never tell Rose about. Something that would make me feel like I had sold off a piece of myself. At first, I laughed, awkwardly. I genuinely thought he was joking. He wasn't. He looked directly at me, and his voice softened. "Think about it. You deserve more than what life's given you. Let me give you something back." I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. I was stunned, sick with a storm of thoughts. I wanted to run upstairs and hide, call Rose, scream, cry, but I didn't move. I just stared at him, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Later that night, in the guest bedroom, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling in the dark. It's wrong. It's so wrong. But what if I don't do it? What happens then? Do I go back to being nothing? Hungry? Alone? The offer gnawed at my mind. No one had ever offered to take care of me. No one had looked at me like I was worth something valuable. It wasn't love. I knew that. But it felt like security. And I was starving for it in more ways than one. I told myself I could handle it. Just once. Just to get by. I could keep it a secret. No one had to know. But even as I whispered those lies to myself, guilt began sinking in like poison. Every scenario played out in my head. What if Rose found out? What if he told someone? What if this wasn't a one-time thing? My heart felt heavy with shame, but it was tangled up in a need I couldn't ignore. And so, I said yes. The second I crossed that line, something inside me changed. I had made a deal with the devil, not because I wanted to, but because the cold had become unbearable. And now, even wrapped in silk sheets and surrounded by luxury, I've never felt more exposed. Every time I'm around Rose, I flinch at her smile, her kindness. I wonder if she knows something. I panic when her dad walks into the room. I feel the guilt gnawing at me like it's trying to eat me alive. But I said yes. And there's no going back. I said yes. Not with words, not immediately. It was a glance, a silence that stretched too long, a shift in my breath when he leaned closer. A reluctant surrender. In hindsight, it wasn't just about survival. It was about being seen, wanted, even if for the wrong reasons. After a lifetime of being overlooked, forgotten, I mistook attention for affection. I told myself it wasn't wrong if it filled the hollow part of me no one else ever noticed. It started quietly. The house was asleep. Lights dimmed. Rose was still out, and her mother was traveling. The air felt heavy with anticipation, like a storm that hadn't broken yet. I stood in the hallway, barefoot, unsure. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I stared at his door, half open, almost like an invitation. He was inside, waiting. When I stepped in, I felt like I was stepping out of my own skin. The room smelled like cedar and leather, the curtains drawn, a single lamp casting a soft amber glow. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. There was no grand declaration, no seduction, just silence and a look that asked if I was sure. And I was. At least, I convinced myself I was. He touched me like he already knew me, like I wasn't some girl sleeping on his daughter's floor. His hands were warm, steady, and deliberate. I felt myself float somewhere between excitement and shame. Part of me was paralyzed by what I was doing, another part gave in like it was the only thing I had ever been meant to do. My body responded even as my conscience screamed. I felt both numb and raw, each kiss burned like a secret etched into my skin. I told myself to stay present, to memorize it, so I'd know later whether it was a mistake or a turning point. When it was over, I lay still, staring at the ceiling. He brushed a strand of hair from my face like it meant something. And for a split second, I let myself pretend that it did. That I wasn't just a secret, or a risk, or a transaction. But reality hit fast and hard. I slipped out of his room like a ghost, walked barefoot back to the guest room, heart still racing. I sat on the edge of the bed in silence for what felt like hours. My reflection in the mirror didn't look like me. It looked like someone I didn't recognize, someone I wasn't sure I could forgive. The next morning, I tried to act normal. Tried being the operative word. Rose came back with coffee and pastries, cheerful and buzzing with stories from the night before. I nodded, smiled where I was supposed to, laughed a little too hard, a little too late. I was hyper-aware of every movement, hers, mine, his. When he walked into the kitchen, dressed like nothing had changed, my stomach twisted into knots. He said good morning like he hadn't pulled me into something irreversible just hours before. I couldn't meet his eyes. But Rose did. She looked between us for a moment, brow slightly furrowed, her smile flickering like a candle in wind. She didn't say anything, but her energy shifted, just a little. Something unspoken passed between us. Or maybe I was just imagining it. That's the problem with secrets. They distort reality until you can't tell what's true. Over the next few days, I lived in a kind of quiet torment. Every conversation with Rose felt like a test. Every time her dad entered the room, my body stiffened. And every time I looked in the mirror, I hated what I saw just a little more. I told myself to stop. I promised myself it would be a one-time mistake. But then it happened again. And again. And every time, I tried to find a reason. I told myself I needed help. He offered to pay for my final semester. I told myself he understood me, no one else ever had. I told myself it didn't mean anything, but that was the cruelest lie of all. Because it did mean something. It meant the beginning of the end of my peace. The guilt wasn't loud. It was quiet, insidious. It whispered when I was alone. It tugged at me in the silence between Rose's sentences. I couldn't sleep without replaying every touch, every glance, every breath. I started to withdraw, missing classes, dodging Rose's texts, avoiding the house unless I was certain he wasn't there. One day, Rose asked if something was wrong. "You've been distant," she said, her tone soft, eyes searching. I lied. I told her I was tired. Overwhelmed with school. I smiled through the nausea building in my chest. But she wasn't the only one noticing. The staff at the house, housekeepers, the driver, they started looking at me differently. Not openly, but with the kind of quiet judgment that clings to the air. One of them avoided eye contact altogether. I began to wonder, who knows? Who suspects? How much longer can I do this before everything crumbles? The secret was eating me alive. I couldn't cry. I didn't feel like I deserved to. I had made a choice. I had crossed a line no apology could uncross. And yet, I still kept going back, drawn in by his pull, by the illusion of safety, by the part of me that was still starving for connection in all the wrong places. I was losing myself. Piece by piece. Moment by moment. And the worst part? I couldn't stop. At first, I thought the nausea was just stress. Everything in my life had become so tightly wound I felt like I was unraveling from the inside. But when I missed my period, and then another, reality slammed into me like a truck I never saw coming. I was pregnant. I stared at the test for what felt like an eternity. 2 pink lines. 1 irreversible truth. I slid to the bathroom floor, knees against my chest, trying to breathe. I kept whispering to myself, no. 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 Not because I didn't know who the father was. I knew. And that's what made it so much worse. I didn't tell anyone at first. I walked through days with my secret pressing on my ribs, a constant silent scream. I couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. I kept avoiding Rose more and more. She noticed. I saw it in the questions she didn't ask, in the way she stared at me when I thought she wasn't looking. Eventually, I told him. We met in a quiet part of the house, his study. I shut the door behind me, my hands trembling. He was seated behind his desk, typing something, eyes flicking up briefly before going back to his screen. I need to talk to you, I said. Something in my tone must have given it away, because he paused. I didn't sugarcoat it. I'm pregnant. His face didn't change at first, just a blink, a small twitch at the corner of his mouth. Then he exhaled sharply, stood, and started pacing. The silence was deafening. How far along? He asked. Almost 9 weeks. He rubbed his temples. You have to end it. The words hit like a slap. Cold. Blunt. Brutal. I'm not going to do that, I said, voice shaking but firm. You don't understand, he snapped, louder now. This will destroy everything. My family. My reputation. Rose. I flinched at her name. He softened his tone, tried to appeal to me. Lizzie, please. If you care about any of us, if you care about her, you'll take care of this quietly. I'll pay for everything. No one has to know. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. After everything, this wasn't something I could erase. For once in my life, I had something that was mine, even if it came from a mistake. No, I said again, this time more clearly. I won't. That was the beginning of the end. We stopped talking. He became distant, cold. I could feel him detaching, pulling away like he hadn't once held me and whispered things I shouldn't have believed. I felt like a liability now. Something he needed to contain. And then Rose found out. Not from me. I had left my phone on her kitchen counter one night. I had been texting a clinic about prenatal care, trying to figure things out quietly. She saw the messages. I walked back into the kitchen and found her standing there, eyes wide, phone in hand. What is this? She asked. I froze. What is this, Lizzie? I didn't answer fast enough. I saw it click in her eyes. The horror. The betrayal. "Who's the father?" she demanded, her voice cracking. I couldn't lie. Not anymore. She stumbled backward, like I had physically hit her. "My father? Are you insane?" "Rose, I didn't mean." "Don't you dare." Her voice rose to a scream. "Don't you dare say you didn't mean it." Her hands shook. Tears streamed down her face, but her rage eclipsed her pain. "I trusted you. I defended you when people talked. I brought you into my home. And you, how long? How long has this been happening behind my back?" "Since that weekend," I whispered, shame crushing my chest. She let out a bitter laugh. "Wow. All that time. And I thought you were my best friend." "I didn't plan any of this, Rose. I was lonely. Desperate. I didn't have anyone." "That's not an excuse," she screamed. "You're disgusting." I watched her break before my eyes. And then she told me to leave. Her father tried to manage the damage, claiming it was all me, that I seduced him, that I had planned it. I overheard him talking to his wife later that week. Spinning stories. I was a girl from nowhere, clinging to their kindness. He played the victim, and I was the dirty secret trying to ruin their perfect family. And just like that, everything collapsed. Rose blocked my number. Stopped showing up to class. Her mother sent me a legal notice to stay away from the house. And I, still carrying the child of a man who now looked at me like I was a mistake he couldn't undo, was completely, utterly alone. I dropped out of school 2 weeks later. The whispers followed me everywhere. I don't know what Rose told her friends, but I know it wasn't the whole truth. People stared. Avoided me. I lost more than a friend, I lost my entire world. I walked through the weeks in a fog, the weight of guilt pressing harder every day. I don't know the exact moment it happened, but it must have been somewhere between the sleepless nights and the cold, quiet mornings. Somewhere between the doctor visits I went to alone and the echo of my own heartbeat when I heard my babies for the first time on the monitor. It wasn't joy I felt, not at first, it was a paralyzing fear laced with guilt. But in that moment, listening to the soft gallop of this tiny life inside me, I made a silent promise. We won't be broken forever. That was the beginning. Not of forgiveness, not of healing, but of survival with intention. I stopped waiting for someone to rescue me. I picked up the phone and called a free counseling center a few blocks away. I didn't know what I expected, maybe a stranger who would stare at me the way everyone else did. But instead, I found someone who didn't flinch when I told the truth. I made a mistake, I said in one session, voice hoarse. I betrayed someone I loved. I hurt her. I hurt myself. And now I'm scared that this baby will grow up thinking they were a mistake too. The therapist looked at me gently. There's a difference between shame and accountability. One will destroy you. The other will teach you how to begin again. I cried in that session. Cried like I hadn't allowed myself to in months. And for once, I wasn't crying for anyone. I was crying for myself. Therapy became my lifeline. It peeled back the layers I had hidden beneath for years. I confronted more than just the mistake with Rose's father. I confronted the abandonment at birth, the years of pretending I didn't care that I had no one, the desperation to be loved, accepted, chosen. I saw how vulnerable I'd been, how I mistook survival for connection. How silence had become my language long before the secret ever began. I wrote Rose a letter. I didn't mail it. At least not right away. I rewrote that letter probably 20 times over the next few months. Sometimes I was angry at her father, at myself. Sometimes I wanted to explain every detail, to make her understand that I didn't mean to destroy anything. But the truth is, I had. and no explanation would make it right. Eventually, I settled on the truth. No dramatics. No defense. Just sorrow. Rose, I wrote, I don't expect forgiveness. I wouldn't blame you if you never wanted to hear from me again. What I did was inexcusable. You gave me everything, and I let my pain distort that. I thought I was surviving. But I see now that I was reaching for something I should have never touched. I never stopped caring about you, even when I did the thing that broke us. I hope one day you find peace with what happened, even if it means forgetting me entirely. I left out the pregnancy. That truth was still mine to carry. By the time I gave birth, I was no longer hiding. It was a long, lonely labor. I remember gripping the sides of the hospital bed between contractions and feeling like I was passing through fire. But then, there she was. My daughter. Tiny, pink, fierce in her first cry. And just like that, my story split in two. Before her. And after. I named her Grace. The nights weren't easier. The judgments didn't stop. But something inside me did change. I started to forgive the girl I used to be. The one who made choices from fear, not power. I started to understand that people are not just the worst thing they've ever done. I never heard from Rose again. I saw her once, months later, across campus, her arm linked with someone else's, her hair longer, face tired. She saw me too. Our eyes locked for a second that stretched out far too long. I gave her a small nod. She didn't return it. But she didn't look away in disgust either. That was enough. I've learned since then that forgiveness isn't a straight path. Some days, I believe I deserve the life I'm rebuilding. Other days, I still hear her voice yelling at me in my sleep. But I'm learning to carry both truths, that I did something wrong, and that I still get to try again. Boundaries matter now. I've learned to say no to the wrong people, to my own bad habits, to the part of me that still craves approval. I'm not the girl who needed to be wanted at any cost anymore. I'm a mother now. A woman who knows the difference between love and desperation. I didn't get closure in the way I wanted. Rose never replied to my letter. Her father never reached out again. But I've stopped waiting for those things. Some endings don't come with doors closed gently, they come with walls you have to climb over yourself. And on the other side, you find something new, not redemption in the eyes of others, but in your own reflection. That's where I am now. Still healing. Still standing. Still trying. But free. Regret doesn't leave like a guest who overstayed their welcome. It lives with you. Quietly, sometimes. Other times, it storms through the room like it owns the place. There are mornings I wake up with the weight of the past pressing on my chest before I've even opened my eyes. But I get up anyway. I make breakfast for Grace. I pack her tiny lunch. I walk her to school, holding her little hand and wondering if she'll ever ask how she came into this world, and whether I'll be ready to tell her the truth when she does. I don't hide from it anymore. I live with it. I live with the reality that one decision, one moment of weakness, of loneliness, of saying yes when I should have walked away, changed the trajectory of my entire life. But instead of letting that moment define me, I've allowed it to teach me. I no longer see love through desperate eyes. I've stopped mistaking validation for connection. If a man raises his voice, or tries to buy my affection with shallow generosity, I walk away. I don't even hesitate. I know now that a relationship without integrity is just another form of harm, sometimes more silent, but no less destructive. And trust? Trust is something I don't give away freely anymore. It's something people have to earn, with consistency, with honesty, with presence. I've learned to protect my peace. I've also learned that sometimes, forgiveness doesn't come in a perfect package. Rose never forgave me. At least not openly. And I don't blame her. Some wounds don't close with time, they just become a part of who you are. But the real work wasn't in trying to win her back. It was in forgiving myself. That took longer than I want to admit. There were nights I looked in the mirror and saw a villain. Other nights I saw a girl who never had a chance to feel wanted without strings attached. But now, when I look at my reflection, I see a mother. A woman. A survivor. Someone who made a terrible mistake, but also someone who chose to grow from it, not bury it. I don't romanticize what happened. I don't pretend it was love, or fate, or some forbidden fairy tale. It wasn't. It was selfish. And scared. And rooted in the kind of pain I didn't even know how to name at the time. But I've named it now. I've faced it. And I've done the work to never let that kind of pain be in the driver's seat again. Grace saved me in ways she'll never understand. She gave meaning to the mess. Purpose to the shame. Her smile is a daily reminder that life can bloom from the ugliest soil. And while I wish I could give her a different story, one without shadows, I also know that she'll grow up watching her mother own every piece of her truth and still stand tall. That's the legacy I hope to leave her. I can't undo the past. I can't go back and choose differently. But every day, I make 1,000 smaller choices to be present, to be accountable, to be kind to myself and the people who trust me. That's what healing looks like for me now. Not forgetting. But choosing not to let one decision be the end of my story. It was a high cost, one moment, one yes, one secret that burned through a friendship and nearly consumed me whole. But I'm still here. And I'm still becoming. Every single day. If you were me, what would you have done? Have you ever stood on that fragile line between loyalty and temptation, knowing what was right, but aching for something that felt like it might finally fill the void inside you? I know my story isn't easy to hear. It's not clean. It's not wrapped in redemption or perfect endings. But it's real. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there needs to know they're not the only one who's made a decision they wish they could take back. I want to hear from you. Have you ever crossed a line you thought you'd never even approach? Have you ever lost someone because of a single choice? Tell me your story in the comments. You don't have to share every detail, just enough to remind yourself, and maybe someone else, that you're human too. And if this story touched something in you, if it made you think, reflect, or feel seen, please consider liking this video and subscribing. It helps others find these stories, and it reminds all of us that we're not alone in our regrets, or our recoveries. Because sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones we fight within ourselves. But those battles don't make us weak. They make us real.